Okay, so for today's video, I'm going to do an Ablecross from Kaiju Universe versus Megalon from the Showa era. Jumping in right into it with durability, it's pretty clear they'd be relatively even. Megalon obviously has scaling kind of off Ghidorah and Zone Fighter as a whole, so at bare minimum, he's going to have Uni Plus level scaling just due to Zone Fighter literally basically nuking a 4D realm on screen. However, this can get much higher with multipliers like the times 100 multiplier that Zone Fighter would have received as he fights a kaiju on the same level as the 4D kaiju after that kaiju had gotten a 100 times multiplier and Zone Fighter beats him with pretty much mid difficulty. So you potentially get him to higher Uni Plus levels of power. So yeah, they're both going to be around that level. The main reason why Ablecross is going to be on that level because he would scale directly to Megalon off scaling off Kaiju Universe's Megalon. And before someone goes and says, well, Kaiju Universe's Megalon shouldn't scale to Showa Megalon because he's feetless, they mention the films he's in his bio. Therefore, meaning they meant for him to be as strong as his film counterpart, so he would have everything the film counterpart would have. So, yeah. You also bring up that Kaiju and Kaiju Universe are hurt by tanks now. If the old kaiju were there, they would have still got hurt by tanks. It's a game mechanic. It's kind of like how demons hurt you in Doom Eternal. When in reality, Doomslayer should literally not even have a scratch on him from almost anything in that game. Now, if they're even, then a lot of people are probably asking themselves, well, how do you even determine a winner here? Well, there's a couple ways you can. But I'll get into those in a second. When it comes to speed, they should both, again, be relatively relative. However, I will say Megalon does seem to have better movements in his films than Ablecross has in Kaiju Universe. So you could argue, although they're equal in speed, Megalon is more mobile. And I'd have to agree because Ablecross is more built for like being tanky, whereas Megalon's more built to move around. They obviously have similar abilities, with Megalon having a horn beam, which I personally think scales directly to at least one of Ghidorah's gravity beams. My reasoning for this is it does the same amount of damage to Showa Godzilla that a gravity beam, a single gravity beam, not multiple, would do. The fact that some of the destructive feats shown are just reused footage of gravity beams, and also the fact it looks basically identical to a gravity beam. So I'm going to have to say that he has scaling to Ghidorah with his damage. He also has a napalm breath, which is pretty powerful in showings, so he's pretty decent in the powers department, but that's not all he has. Obviously, he has his drill hands, which are strong enough to harm Jet Jaguar and Godzilla. They're pretty comparable to Showa Geigen's hook blades, which should almost scale to his saw, which can actually cut Showa Godzilla, which is incredibly impressive. He is notably weaker than Gigan due to official statements, but probably not by a tremendous amount, as they did show relativity in their Godzilla vs. Megalon showings together. Ablecross is definitely not lacking the powers department either. He has a projectile he can fire from his horn that is kind of homing. It's very similar to some of the Diamond Rain abilities that Bagon has, where he fires basically mini stars. I would put this ability above Napalm Breath, just because I feel like a miniature star is going to do more damage than basically just super-powered Napalm. He also has his own Horn Beam. I would say his Horn Beam might be either equal or weaker than Megalon's, depending on how you look at it. In gameplay, it is definitely stronger than Megalon's if you're going off showings between the two. But going off a actual standpoint of scaling it, in terms of its actual showings in game, it is pretty powerful. It's strong enough to damage attacks. It's strong enough to damage kaiju. It should scale all the way up to Showa Gigan and Showa Titanosaurus. If you're scaling him to the Kaiju Universe that would scale to Showa Titanosaurus, then he would significantly upscale anything Showa Megalon ever showed. However, I don't think it's really fair to say that he automatically scales to this, as his beam is also shown taking its time trying to damage enemies that are only really scaled to, like, female Muto and male Muto. Now you could argue that those two would also, by just proxy like him, scale to show a Titanosaurus as of now, and potentially eventually Heisei Kaiju, and even stronger Kaiju, but for now, I'm going to have to assume that although he could upscale Megalon to a substantial amount, as of now, I can't really put him that high. I will say, personally, I do think his beams and ranged attacks beat Megalon's. However, when you look at melee combat, his claws, while long and deadly and definitely effective in combat, I don't see 3 long claws really matching a drill hand made out of super durable metal. So, for melee combat, although Ablecross does technically have a little bit more range with his claws than Megalon has with his drills, I'm going to have to give Megalon an edge in melee combat, and Ablecross an edge at range. When it goes to speed and like overall movements, well, I already did speed, but overall movements, they're both very versatile. Megalon is relatively fast in running. He can swim pretty decently, although I do think Ablecross is faster in the water. He can burrow underground very effectively, and he can fly. When it goes to Ablecross is almost the same. He can swim likely a little faster than Megalon due to in-game showings of him being pretty damn fast in the water. He can burrow underground almost as effectively. I do think Megalon's a little better at burrowing, just due to drills being more effective at that than long claws like the ones that Ablecross has. He obviously can run, and he's pretty fast for Kaiju Universe Kaiju, but not like the fastest by any means. We do not see him fly, though. However, I do think it is possible he could fly. I would say it's like a Bagon situation. With Bagon having energy wings he can form. I can see Ablecross doing the same thing, but we just haven't seen it in gameplay. The reason I would say it's something like Bagon is that there's actually a fan theory that he's Bagon's kid. And if you were to actually go off that, he would basically one-shot Megalon. Because you have to go by Godzilla Jr. logic, meaning he would upscale Bagon. So, yeah, but I don't think there's enough evidence to really put that there other than looking kind of similar and having similar abilities. But when you look at what they can do, I don't think it's too out there to assume he can do the energy wing thing that Bagon can do. But we just have no showings of it. The main reason for this is Kaiju Universe's Megalon not being able to fly, so why would they give his replacement the ability to fly? I do think flying is a possibility for him, but I just cannot give him it for this debate because we just cannot prove he can. Megalon does have a significant edge in being able to go into the air for this fight, whereas Ablecross will have to stay on the ground or on the ground. When it comes to overall intelligence, I do think Ablecross is smarter significantly. From his bio, all we really get is that he's kind of an alien kaiju, so we can't really say too much about him just from that. But just from how he acts in game, I know he doesn't really have much to go off of. He just doesn't seem comedically dumb like Megalon. Megalon is stupid. That's part of his character. He's not very bright. It's funny. That's who he is. Ablecross seems far more serious and threatening. So I'm going to say Ablecross beats him in IQ. As for experience, I'd have to give it to Megalon because we don't have a canon age for Ablecross. And Megalon is quite old. He's been fighting for a long time. So I'm going to have to give Megalon experience. As for overall build, they are both built pretty decent for this fight. Megalon is less armored, but has better weapons. Ablecross has better jaws, but in longer reach, but is overall just not built to keep up with Megalon in melee combat, at least from a speed standpoint. From a power standpoint, he should be able to. So, I'm about to say they draw on that. So who do I actually see winning this fight? Well, this is a little tricky, as we have to really take into consideration a lot of factors here. But ultimately, I think it depends on a couple things. One, if Megalon's playing it smart. Two, if it's at a range or up close. And three, if they know what each other can do before they start fighting. I'd say if it's the first thing, Megalon plays it smart, and they both have no knowledge of each other prior to the fight. Megalon is going to use his flight to his advantage. He's going to spam Napalm Breath and horn beams while in the air, making it much harder for Ablecross to land hits on him, since they are pretty comparable in durability and power. And Megalon just has this huge advantage in the sky. I don't see Ablecross being able to counter a flying enemy of similar strength, especially if Megalon starts dive bombing him with drills. As I already explained, the drills would be very effective against Ablecross in melee combat, so if Megalon just uses likely superior mobility and speed with his flight, I just don't see Ablecross being able to counter Megalon before he's just done for. Now, depending on if they start out at a range and up close, and again, have no knowledge of each other, but Megalon isn't necessarily playing it smart, as that's kind of out of character. I see at a range, I see Ablecross beating Megalon's ass pretty bad. His beams are better, his projectiles are better, and he just seems smarter. Also, if you use higher scalings or fan theories for him, he would just decimate Megalon at a range regardless. Close up, I see Megalon winning relatively easily, as they should be relatively similar in power, but with mobility and Megalon's superior weapons, I see him taking the win pretty quick, as his drills would be able to easily bypass Ablecross's armor, and his superior experience would give him a slight edge in melee combat, tied with his mobility, and obviously the drills again. Now, if they both have knowledge of each other prior, I see Ablecross winning pretty quickly. He'd be smarter, he'd be able to exploit Megalon's weaknesses quicker, and although Megalon could use his experience and melee combat to his advantage plus flight, Ablecross could just as easily spam going underground and force Megalon into ranged combat through just repeated retreats, as he would know that he shouldn't fight Megalon close up, and he would also know prior that Megalon could use flight and beam spams to his advantage. But in a normal fight scenario, with both having absolutely no knowledge of each other whatsoever, I think Ablecross most likely wins if he plays it smart. However, I could also see Megalon winning as well if he utilizes flight mainly to his advantage. So this might be the first tie here. It's a weird matchup. They seem pretty even close up, but they're actually pretty different. Megalon is kind of stupid, but his melee combat and flight give him a huge advantage over Ablecross. But Ablecross's beams are something Megalon just cannot handle repeated attacks from, and Ablecross being smarter but lacking the same melee combat stats means that he'll have to play it smart by default, because if he gets too close, Megalon's going to pretty easily beat the shit out of him. So, honestly, I think it's more of a draw than anything. Which makes sense, as Megalon's replacement for Kaiju Universe should be on Megalon's level. So that's how I see this fight going. If you guys think I missed anything or see this fight going a different way, I'll be happy to hear your opinion on it in the comments. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next one.